Welcome back to the Speaking and Communicating podcast. I am your host, Roberta. If you are looking to improve your communication skills, both professionally and personally, this is the podcast you should be tuning into. Communication skills are crucial for your career growth and leadership development. The Speaking and Communicating podcast is part of the B Podcast Network, which is a platform to help you become the kind of leader that you want to see and the change you want to see in the world. To learn more about the B Podcast Network, go to bpodcastnetwork.com. Now, my guest today, since we talk so much about mental health and how it affects the workplace and your personal life, is a mental health coach and an emotional fitness trainer. Benjy Sherer, hailing all the way from Canada, is here to share with us his journey and how he got to be the kind of person who helps people in this space. And before I go any further, please help me welcome him to the show. Hi, Benjamin, who goes by Benjy.
Hi, Roberta. So good to be here. Yes, I prefer Benjy. Thank you very
Okay.
much. Benjamin just sounds very, very mature. Like when I'm 80, you can call me Benjamin. For now, Benjy is fine.
We'll remember that on your 80th
Yeah,
birthday. Go ahead.
yeah. It's a
Yeah.
pleasure to be here with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you
Yeah,
for being
definitely
here.
excited to talk about all this. It's my pleasure.
Me too. Thank you for being on the show. Welcome.
Sorry, you cut out there for a second.
Can you hear me
Yeah,
now?
I
Sorry.
can indeed.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I will try and keep it relatively short, but a bit about
No
my
need.
background. No, no need. Okay. So grew up in Montreal, Quebec in Canada, which is a beautiful place, has a lot of great culture, a lot of great things going on, aside from the terrible winters. It is a beautiful place to grow up. And went to went to private Jewish school, so was kind of in this small bubble of a kind of culture and community. I recognized from a very young age that there was a lot of beautiful things to our community, but we were only experiencing kind of like one very small version of what life was, and I felt the need to explore a little bit more than that in my teenage years and in my university. And along with that need to kind of explore different cultures and communities and different lifestyles, I had an intense fear of death my entire life. I remember actually one of my first memories ever was me sitting in my bed when I was probably like 4 years old and counting down from 10 in my head. And the closer that I got down to 0, 9, 8, 7, I got this horrible turning feeling in the pit of my stomach because some part of me was understanding this concept that like the clock is ticking and at a certain point you get down to 0 and it's over. And I didn't really understand that at the time, but the older that I got, when I was like 8, 9, 10, I started thinking about death and seeing, articles or seeing death around me when I went to a funeral at like 9 years old. I started getting that same turning feeling in the pit of my stomach. And it started to occur, like I started understanding that this constant tension, this constant fear that I was in was this fear of death. So that led me to studying philosophy and world religions. So in CEGEP, which is something we have in Montreal, which is like 2 years in between high school and university. So in CEGEP and in university, I was studying a lot of philosophy and a lot of Eastern religions, studying Christianity, studying Islam, just kind of trying to get a bit of a taste of everything because I was desperately trying to find, in my mind, somewhere that I could put God or the afterlife or just some gap in logic about the physical world. Because when I was very young, I did believe in God and, felt like I had a connection with God or so. But as I started getting a little bit older, I started questioning all of that. And because I had realized that having been born Jewish, I believed in Judaism only because I was born into that.
Hmm.
And I recognized at around 12 years old that, like, well, if I had been born Christian, I'd believe in Christianity. Or if I had been born Muslim,
Like
I'd
us.
believe in Islam. So I had to start questioning and looking at things. So I studied philosophy and world religion as a way to try and find this gap in logic, somewhere where I could put God or religion or the afterlife to kind of quell that fear of death. And also because I desperately wanted to figure out what I believed about life and the universe and everything so that I could really figure out how I wanted to live my life. And by the time I got through the end of my main studies, I did an honors degree. Um, I was still lost. I hadn't found anywhere. I hadn't found that place where I could say, like, oh, you know what? Well, this doesn't quite make sense, so there must be a God or there must be an afterlife. I did have these ideas about quantum mechanics and the idea that, like, well, if the universe is actually 11 dimensions as opposed to just the four, then maybe there's something there. So I had some thoughts, but I still felt lost, still felt kind of hopeless, still felt kind of depressed, and just kind of wanted to then make the most of my life. Like, if there is no meaning, if there is no greater thing, which is how I felt at the time, if there's nothing more to life, then I just want to make the most of this physical world. So I finished my degrees and I started playing bass in a band. And that was a few of the best years of my life, and it was a lot of fun. And the guys that I was playing with, two brothers who were complete rock stars. And I mean that in the best and the worst ways. So I mean, like, they were rock stars in the sense that they were ridiculously talented, like virtuosos, and even to this day, it is an absolute shame that they didn't achieve the fame that they deserve. While also, on the other hand, being rock stars in the sense that they are very irresponsible and terrible business acumen and never follow through on their plans, which is why they never attained the fame that they deserved. So I played with them for a while and it was fantastic, but when we weren't making the progress that we wanted to because they were rock stars, I dropped out of the band and then spent like 6, 7 months just trying to figure out what to do with myself. And the way that I express it to people is, what does a good Jewish boy with a background in philosophy do when he's given up on life? He goes to law school. So
Is that the answer to that? Okay.
Yes, that's the answer to the question. Yeah, it's when you don't know what to do with yourself and like, well, I spent 6 months going through every option in my head. Well, maybe I'll be a luthier and repair guitars, or maybe I'll be a teacher, or maybe I'll be an accountant. Maybe I went through like if you took a list of careers, it's like I went through all of them and not a single one of them felt meaningful to me. So when
And
none of
law
them
school did
feel,
it?
no, but I'm just, no, but law school did not seem any more meaningful, but philosophy tends to lead into law school. Like there is a connection
Oh,
there. If you're
okay.
good at philosophy, you will likely be very good in law.
Right. Okay.
So, when you have when none of the options feel meaningful, but law is, at least it's a lucrative profession. And if you know that you're going to be good at it and it's, easy for you,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I chose to do. But immediately, and I knew this even before I started, but first day that I showed up at law school, I looked around at everyone and just, with no judgment, just like, this isn't me. Not looking down on them or not trying to puff myself up, but just looking around at them. I'm just like, they all seem like lovely people, but this doesn't feel right to me. So I spent 2 years in law school, 2.5, I think. And as I started going down it more and more and more, I just started getting more and more depressed and more anxious. And it got to a point where I couldn't eat and I couldn't sleep and I couldn't get out of bed. And not because it was hard, exactly. Like there are some people who drive themselves insane in law school, spending, 16 hours a day in the library. And that's why, they have to tap out. It wasn't like that for me. Like I said, with my background in philosophy, the actual schooling of it was fairly easy. If you're not fighting for top of the class, and if you understand what it is that they're asking from you, law school isn't actually all that hard. Because all of the cases that you're studying, they've been summarized by 10,000 different students before you. So you can go and get the notes. And if you understand how to think and how to answer a question, I was the guy that would show up on the first day of class and then would show up at the last day of class for the exam. And everyone else in the class who hadn't seen me all semester would be like, wait, you're in this class? And I'd be like, yeah, I'm in
And
this
what
class.
grade would you get?
I would usually get a B plus or an A minus.
Oh, we hated
And
your
just,
kind of university.
yeah. Well, don't get me wrong. In philosophy, I worked my butt off. In law school, it was like, look, all right, I just wanted to do the bare minimum and get through it, which is also a great sign that, like, I shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
So I did 2.5 years of doing things that way. But like I said, by the end, couldn't get out of bed, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The actual, I'm going too long on this background, but the story
I'm
that,
enjoying it. I'm sure the listeners
okay,
will as well. So please go ahead.
okay. So the story actually of what finally got me out of law school was there was one exam that I had deferred earlier, like at the end of the year. I deferred the exam because of anxiety. I was just like I said, I was not stressed out is not the right word, but suffering too much with anxiety and depression. On the day of the exam, I just couldn't do it. So I deferred the exam. And I was supposed to take the exam sometime in the summer, but I was so anxious and so resistant and so like I didn't want to do it that I just never checked the date of the exam. So that like time is coming. And then by the end of the summer, I'm like, huh, so when is that exam? And I go and check it and I already missed it by a week.
Wow.
So once that was done, firstly, that was a big sign to me that, look, Benji, clearly some part of you is fighting this intensely, but also you now have a 0 in this class. You are getting A minuses and B pluses, and that was great, but now you have a 0 in this class, and that's going to mess up your average. So that was just the sign that kind of pushed me to finally make a move. And so I was scrolling on Facebook one day, and I saw an ad for a band that was looking for a manager. And even though I'd never managed a band before or anything, I responded to the ad. And when I showed up in that room, even though I had no idea what I was doing,
Mm.
I felt at home in a way that I didn't feel at home in law school. And so that started my spiral. Moving out of law school, I dropped out, I built a recording studio, and I spent the next 3 or 4 years living that dream. It wasn't even a dream, it was like a fantasy. Because there was
Hmm.
no point in my life where I thought like, maybe I could run a recording studio. Like that was not even in the realm of things that seemed possible. But, you know, I did a very budget version MacGyver style. Like I had never used a power tool before in my life, but I built the studio and I had no official training as a sound engineer, but I taught myself and I started doing it and it was fantastic. And while I was running my recording studio, I started working gigs at few various venues,
Mm-hmm.
concerts and other stages and stuff like that. And I found myself at this burlesque club where I started working as a sound engineer there. I started running the sound for the shows.
Right.
And there was something magical about that place. There was something about the energy and the attitude and the openness. I just fell in love with that place and the people there, and it was fantastic. And so I actually started performing burlesque there because
Mm.
that's how, I mean, I just really took to them and to the environment. And I was still a performer at the time, and my dream was to sing. So I started performing burlesque as a way to improve my confidence, as a way to, you like, if you can perform burlesque, if you can finish a performance with nothing but a pink sock while, you know, crowd of, you know, bachelorette parties kind of cheer in the background, stuff like that, you know that you're never going to be nervous on stage again.
Right.
So
Is
it
it almost
was,
like you inhabit an alter ego when you become your own Sasha Fierce kind of thing?
that's it. You dial your own personality up to 11 and you take on this alter ego. So I was actually performing under the name Man Halen.
I like it.
So that was my alter ego. And in
Okay.
the band, I was known as Crash Adams. So I've had a few alter egos throughout my day.
Mm.
And uh, what happened with the burlesque club, like that turned out to be kind of ground zero for my awakening, a kind of like emotional awakening and a spiritual awakening, and for all the healing that I went through. Because what I hadn't realized at the beginning when I started there was there were a lot of really unhealthy emotional and relationship dynamics going on there. They were
Mm-hmm.
mistreating me. They were pushing me away. There was a lot of gaslighting, a lot of emotional abuse, just a lot of people who what I hadn't realized at the beginning was I was there, like I was performing there because I was finally learning how to be myself. Finally learning how
Mm.
to not care what people think, how to bring the most passionate, most expansive, most loving version of myself out into the world without fear, without any issues. That's what drew me to the place because that's what I thought that everyone there was doing. There was a freedom about it. There was an openness to expression about the freedom of being able to get on stage and do this kind of thing. But what I didn't realize at the time was that while I was there learning to become the most authentic version of myself, most people were there hiding from themselves. Because burlesque was a lot of alter egos and a
Yeah.
lot of glitz and glamour and smoke and mirrors and a lot of makeup. Like most of the people there, I didn't even know their real names. I called them by their burlesque name. And there was, this world of sex and drugs and alcohol that was associated with that whole thing, where a lot of people there were running from their own trauma and running from their own pain and using this alter ego and this glitz and glamour and makeup as a way to hide from themselves, and using the sex and drugs and alcohol as a way to numb their pain away. Whereas I didn't see it that way at the beginning. I thought that this was freedom. Everyone was open to truly being who they were, not realizing that a lot of them were actually using it as a way to cover up their pain. And so the more that I started being and expressing my truest self to them and really coming out as that expansive, highly passionate version, it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. They didn't
Oh,
like it because I was reflecting a version of myself. Like there's an expression in the spiritual community that says, some people will never like you because your light irritates their demons. Now, I don't love
yes,
these.
I've heard that. It's almost like the opposite version of the Marian Williamson quote of our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. You know that quote? It's
Yeah,
yeah. So when you hear that, sometimes they say the opposite happens. If you think I'm gonna let other people shine, if I let my light shine, they get irritated and want you to step back. So I think that's what you're referring to, kind
it's
of.
something along those lines. It was that
Mm.
the fact that I was opening up to my truest self kind of shined a light on the fact that they weren't. They saw
Mm.
someone who was truly being open and truly being themselves and truly being passionate in a way that they were using this place as a way to hide from themselves. So now here's this person that's using it in this other way, and it's kind of subconsciously. I don't think that any of them recognize this
No.
consciously, but subconsciously makes them realize that, like, well, that's not me. I'm not doing that. Here I am just trying to hide. Please leave me alone. Please don't see the real me. And here's this other person who's going, hi, please look at the real me. Please look at the real me. And it's like it. And because I didn't understand any of this at the beginning either,
Mm.
I was looking through their masks. I was seeing them. I was trying to see underneath all of that, the glitz and glamour. I was trying to see the real people behind them. And they didn't like that.
Mm.
They didn't want to be seen. Now, I have to just always put this asterisk now of who knows, maybe I'm misinterpreting. Maybe some of them were different because, like, I have my side of the story, they have their side of the story.
For
But that
sure.
is what I took away from it. That the more that I started opening up, the more that and I'm sure that, like, I know a lot of the people that I've helped, and I'm sure a lot of your audience might have experienced this thing of, being called out for being too passionate, for being too much, for being too, you express too much. You need to quiet yourself down in order to fit
Yeah,
into the
because
crowd
then
kind of thing.
people become uncomfortable in in your presence if they feel like you are being too much.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what happened there. And they started turning against me and they started becoming very rude to me. They were gaslighting me. They were being very emotionally manipulative. And then on top of that, I fell in love with one of them. I fell in love with a woman who was an alcoholic and who was suicidal and who had some other issues. And again, I don't know if I didn't notice it or if I just didn't fully appreciate it at first. I didn't appreciate how much pain that she was in because I was seeing everything through my own particular lens.
Right.
I was in this space because I was learning how to love myself. So when I saw these other people that were partying in that way and that were open in this kind of sex, drugs, and alcohol kind of way, I interpreted it as, oh, well, they're also being their full selves, not realizing that, again,
They
she was
were
stuffing away her
hiding.
pain with these things. So I didn't recognize all of that at the beginning. And then there's a whole story of what happened with her and I, but I won't get into that. But basically, when things turned sour with her because she couldn't handle emotions. And at the beginning, we were just hanging out. We even had the discussion of what are we after a few months, and we both decided, like, look, I said that I'm focused on my life and my, I had built this recording studio. I'm focused on that direction that I'm going in, so I'm not really looking for a relationship. And she told me that, like, well, she can't handle emotions, so she's not looking for a relationship. So great, we're just hanging out. But then at a certain point, some stuff happened and it became real. Like the emotions became real. And so I started, like, I really fell in love with her. And because I fell in love with her and she couldn't handle emotions, she started pulling away. But she wouldn't talk to me about it. She wouldn't explain to me what happened. So all of a sudden now I'm feeling intense emotions and she's feeling intense emotions. But my reaction to feeling the intense emotions is to try and get
Lean in
closer.
more.
And her reaction to the intense emotions is to run the hell away. And I didn't understand any of this at the time. So the more that she ran away, the more desperate that I became. And the more desperate that I became in that relationship, because she was a central point of the social group at that burlesque club. So the more awkward the things got between us, the more that, like, because she had been there before me also. So everyone knew her more than they knew me,
Right.
and kind of gravitated towards her side of the story, even though there wasn't a story. She wasn't like spreading rumors or anything. It was just that all of a sudden there was this awkwardness between her and I, where I had to pretend like I didn't care about her. She had to pretend like nothing was going on. And it created this awkward energy that everyone kind of gravitated towards her side of, which led to more of the gaslighting and more of the emotional abuse from these people at that club. And so that sent me into this horrible downward spiral where just everything in my life fell apart. I couldn't enjoy the burlesque club anymore, which was my home at that time. It was the place in my life that for the first time finally felt like home, where I felt fully comfortable. And now I wasn't being accepted there, and everything was very awkward, and I had to pretend like I didn't care. So that started spiraling out of control, and I was so in love with this woman also that I couldn't stop thinking about her. It was insane. It was genuinely insane how much, like, I could not go a minute without her on my mind. So even when I was in my recording sessions, I couldn't focus anymore. So I couldn't run my
Wow.
recording studio, and I couldn't be at the burlesque club anymore. And then one of the other venues that I was working at shut down and became this medical center. So everything fell apart. And I, for the first time in my life, became genuinely suicidal. And I couldn't I didn't, like, after having left law school to find this and then losing it, I was just like, is there ever gonna, like, it was so out of left field that I found any place that I could be happy. And there's no other place like this. I'm not gonna find this again. So I just spent, 3 years or so super depressed because of law school, and then miraculously found this new life for myself.
And now you
And then
lose
that
it
new life came
again.
crashing down. And so I didn't believe that there was ever a way out again. So I became genuinely suicidal. And when all of the standard approaches to mental health and all the standard lessons that I was learning online just made me hate myself even more and hate the world even more, that's when I kind of started going through an awakening of my own, which at the time was this intense spiritual awakening, but we can just look at it as an emotional awakening at this point, because I've come down from that kind of high-end spiritual place where I was at the time. But I had to go through that kind of spiritual awakening that led me to discover a lot of things about myself, and that led me down this path of emotional healing that eventually just kind of snowballed into the work that I'm doing now. The more that I started doing the healing, the more that I started sharing myself online, because authentic self-love and self-expression is a huge part of the healing journey that I was going down. So I started sharing of myself, and the more that I started sharing, the more that it started becoming clear that I really did have a unique perspective, really did have a way with words, really did have something unique and special to share with the world, that I was helping people just by sharing my own story and my own journey. So I started sharing more, and it just kind of started snowballing into creating my courses and writing my books and becoming a coach. It all just happened naturally. Like, there was never a point at which I sat down and
Because it
thought,
came
okay,
from
well,
you, your experiences. It's not something you had to sort of, not that you didn't have to think about. Obviously you did, but just having gone through those things, like you shared your experiences. It's you. So you're sharing you. That's how people connect with you, because you were just sharing you.
That's exactly it. The work that
Mhm.
I do is just me. It's just me being the most authentic version of myself. That's what I do. That's what I do for a living. I be me.
Mm.
I show up, I share my life experiences and my path. And yes, because of this healing that I went through and everything, like I created, tools and exercises and skills. So I have specific things that I'm teaching people. But overall, it's just me being and sharing the most authentic version of myself, my own wisdom, my own path, my own experiences, my own opinions, with those who resonate with it. And the more that I start doing it, the results that I have seen from people have been
Mm.
nothing short of miraculous. Like I've had people who have spent 3 decades in therapy, people who have been on all the medications, who have tried CBT and DBT and EMDR and spiritual retreats and empowerment retreats and meditation and yoga and everything, finally learning how to wake up happy. People who had
Mm.
come to me genuinely suicidal, people who had planned their suicide, who, like me, had believed that they would never be happy again. And they stumbled across my webinar, they stumbled across my book, and it gave them some hope. And they signed up for my course. And within 8 weeks or a couple of months, had them just feeling completely differently about their lives by teaching them how to handle their emotions and handle their thoughts and handle the sensations in their body in a way that they had never understood before. So when I see someone who spent 30 years analyzing their trauma in therapy, finally learning how to be and express their true selves, it's a truly beautiful experience. It is an honor to be able to help my clients.
Very fulfilling, I'm sure. I want to go back to the beginning of your story. I was raised Christian.
Sure. Okay.
And, they used to scare us with the idea that if you do something wrong, God is watching in secret and you're going to go to hell on Judgment Day and Satan's waiting with the fork. So, but I didn't have the level of fear of death that you described. Even though I do something, sometimes I knew if I was doing something wrong, I'm like, oh, hell, here you come, here the fork comes. What do you think caused that level, the fear to that extent, to that depth of the fear of death? Because I'm sure every religion mentions death, and it sort of might make their followers be afraid of it.
So for me, the fear of death it wasn't the fear of hell the way it might have been for you. To me, the fear of death is that one day it's over. That we've got,
Mm.
20 to 100 years if we're lucky on this planet, you got, let's say, up to 100 years on this planet. And then one day, that's it. For the rest of eternity, complete nothingness. That is what scares the absolute living hell out of me. And I
Mm.
don't know where it came from. If we're going like keeping in mind that the spiritual awakening that I went through and how natural the work that I'm doing now is, if I'm going to give you the best, like, I think the most honest answer that I can give you, I think, is that the fear of death
Mm.
was an intricate part of my journey. So if we're looking from the spiritual awakening part, if we're going, like, if we can presume for a moment that there is something more to this universe and
Yeah.
that I came in here with this mission and purpose and passion kind of thing, the fear of death was necessary to lead me on this path. That
To
when I look,
explore and study and question. Mm.
if I hadn't had the fear of death, I wouldn't have studied philosophy. I wouldn't have been in the band. I wouldn't have lived my life in a particular way that eventually led me to what I'm doing now. So if you want a more practical answer of what created it, I don't know. I just think that there was something in my mind. Like I think that I loved life. I
Yeah.
love it. Like even though it had its challenges and there was pain involved, even at a young age, I understood that I am enjoying this life, and the idea that it will one day just completely end was petrifying.
Right. When
But
sorry, go ahead.
no, no, please.
When you felt suicidal, why went drugs to numb your pain your first go-to? Because you started exploring the spiritual path. Because a lot of the time, not that I know, but some people that I'm close to, You know, one, I find that in this culture, you guys don't talk to people close to you. Well, at least compared to where I come from. And secondly, now that I'm in America and I've had somebody close to me, they say, the first thing you think of is, let me go get drugs to numb my depression, my anxiety. Why was that not your first point of call? And did you not have anybody to talk to about how you were feeling?
So I I had people that would listen, let's say. Like I had my mom around and maybe a couple of friends that I could talk to, but no one that I felt understood what I was saying or or knew what to say in response, or even, when I would go to see a therapist or something.
Hmm.
I just didn't feel like I felt like I had a certain level of self-awareness and introspection that a lot of people don't have, which is why I am, and as proof, like the work that I'm doing now is proof of that. The fact, like, what makes me good at what I do is my ability to look into myself and to both analyze my experiences in a particular way, but also learn how to cope with them in various ways. So I had a certain level of self-awareness that most people do not. I think I can say that at this point in my life without it being arrogant or ego. I'm not great at everything. I'm not great at maths. I'm not great at sciences. I'm not great at history.
Come to
I
me
am
for math.
great. Yeah, I am great at introspection,
Mm.
philosophy, religion, looking and investigating our experiences of life and deciphering meaning and lessons from them and learning how to be myself. That's where my skills lie. So you take someone like that and put me in front of a therapist who doesn't necessarily have that innate skill, but who has simply studied at school
Right.
for 6 to 8 years, it's not the same. They're regurgitating out of a book or they're taking notes in this particular way, but they haven't mastered themselves. So there were people that I could talk to. But so with therapists, for example, I felt like, look, maybe if I talk to this person for the next 5 years, then they'll understand me enough and I'll understand them enough, and maybe we can finally make a breakthrough.
Yeah, like a
But I wasn't,
relationship. You get to know each
yeah.
other, over time. So you thought that's how it was going to play out?
I thought at best that was how, because I was
Right.
not appreciating or enjoying or getting anything out of my sessions with the therapist at the beginning. It felt like I was trying to get someone up to speed about what I already know about myself, and all the things that they were suggesting, like I said, actually made me hate myself more because I already understand about me the thing that you're pointing out right here in this moment. And I've thought for thousands of hours about it. But you're now sitting here across from me saying it to me as if understanding that is supposed to make me feel better, but I don't feel better. I've already understood that about myself. And now, not only am I thinking about that thing that's about myself, but I now have to explain to you why knowing what you just said doesn't changing anything for me. And so I felt like I was getting the therapist up to speed. It was not a
Mm.
pleasant
The
experience. So I
teacher
had
was the
people,
student. Okay. Mm,
I
mm.
mean,
Kinda.
I
In
don't
the
know
in
that
your
I would go
mm-hmm.
exactly, because that sounds a little more arrogant than I would put. Like I
All
didn't.
right.
It's not like I was teaching him about psychology, but as far as he didn't understand me, and he was
You.
regurgitating out of a book, and like so, it just didn't feel right. It wasn't helpful. So there were people that I could talk to, but they weren't helpful. And when I did, even like when I would talk to my mom about it, it just there were people who made me feel like like I was doing something wrong by just being aware of myself or by trying to express myself. Or there was this period um, where a few people in particular were taking advantage of me, being very cruel. Like the short version of it, while I was running the recording studio, the last project that I ever took on was something that I called the Octa Launch. Or it was basically I took 8 striving artists, like solo artists, recorded their albums for free, and was going to promote their music through my stuff. And there were a couple of people, a couple of the artists that I'd taken on for free, spent a lot of my time, a lot of my energy, get like recording their stuff, mixing it, preparing for the release, and a couple of them who really took advantage of me. One of them who just the day before the launch of his album decided, nope, I'm not going to do this, and pulled out. Because I made one little comment about his album cover. Not even a comment. Like he sent me the picture of his album cover, and it was just a picture of his living room. And I go, okay, are you sure you want to use that? It was just a picture of the living room.
Fair
And
question.
and just asked. And as soon as he said yes, I'm like, okay, cool, no problem. But even me asking just sent him off. Like, oh, whoa, I thought that you weren't, I didn't know that you were like wanted to have creative control over my project and you were going to say things, so I don't want to do this. Like, whoa, okay. And then he ghosted me. Or another one, I was supposed to put her music up on my business's SoundCloud page because that's the whole, like, that's kind of the whole point. We're releasing it through there. But there was a bit of a rush and she asked me if she could put it up on her SoundCloud instead. I'm like, okay, no problem. So I sent her the music. She uploaded it onto hers and then disappeared. I've never heard from her again. So she just
Wow.
took the music, sold it on her own, and I've sent her messages, has just never responded since that day. There were a couple of people who had taken advantage of me. And like, even when I expressed that to my mom, I remember her trying like, well, what did you do? Like, what did you do wrong to deserve this? And look, there's always two sides to
Okay,
the story.
so
And
sometimes,
I'm not trying to say that I don't want to look at myself and that there haven't been times where I caused certain problems. And I do live now by a lesson of even when someone else has genuinely done something wrong, what could you have done to change the situation? So I'm not saying that I don't want to look at myself and I want to pretend like I never do anything wrong. But in this particular situation where people are being cruel to you and you've been taken advantage of and someone is trying to make you think, well, what did you do wrong? It feels insulting. I recorded her album for her and she took it and
it's
ghosted
not the
on me and
best
you're
way for
asking
her
me what I
to
did.
handle, the situation. No, the
Yeah.
reason I ask is because, and now that you've shared your experience, it makes people understand why a lot of people wouldn't even bother sometimes sharing how they're feeling because they feel like they're not going to understand anyway, what's going on inside of me. And then when you started doing this work, there are I watched some of your videos and you say you can't logic away emotional pain,
Yeah.
which I feel some of us who don't understand when a person goes through that, I think that's where we come in. We come in with the logic.
Yeah. So as modern humans, we are very used to living up in our head. That's what we experience. We do all of our lives through logic and rationality and thinking things through, and we are very disconnected from that kind of core part of ourselves. Like some people even scoff and roll their eyes at the idea of intuition. Everything has to be logical. Like I've been watching old episodes of Dr. House, for example, and it's all
Oh,
about
you'll be
logic. It's
best
all
friends
about
with
rationality.
my brother. He loves
Yeah.
those.
But there are people like House who like everything has to be logical. If there isn't like this logical deduction and kind of like logical math to it, then it's not real. So they're like, we spend a lot of time living up in our heads. If we can't understand something logically, then it's not real. And that was why, I spent all of that time in philosophy looking for, a logical gap, somewhere that I could put God or the universe or the afterlife. And so we spend our lives pushing away emotional discomfort that feels like a threat. So when I say, you can't logic away emotional pain, the way that I like to express is like, look, let's say that you had a headache and you sat down with the doctor and the doctor explained to you, all right, well, here are all the reasons why you have a headache. Firstly, there are these chemicals going on in your brain. Secondly, it's because you haven't slept enough. And thirdly, it's because 10 years ago, you were hit in the head with, with a bucket. And now there's some trauma that's still in your brain. And so these are all the reasons why you have a headache. If the doctor did that, would you then go, thank you, doctor, I feel so
I'm
much better. My
healed.
headache is gone. Have a great day. Or would you say, well, that's great, doc,
What?
but what do we do about it?
Yes. Well, how do we make this thing go away?
Exactly. So what people tend to be doing in therapy, again, I want to put an asterisk on this in advance because I'm not trying to say that there aren't phenomenal therapists out there. I'm not trying to say
No,
that,
we're
like,
not knocking
there,
therapy at all.
yeah.
No,
And
not at
because
all.
therapy is also a very generic term. There are lots of different kinds of therapy. There's physical therapy and emotional therapy. And even with the emotional, there's cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectic behavioral. Like there's all sorts of different approaches and different things. And I'm glad that we live in a world that has all of these different approaches. But a lot of people, well, this was my experience and just so many clients that I've worked with, they spend their time in therapy trying to find and analyze the trauma. So you're carrying around this pain, you're carrying around these defense mechanisms of why do I keep pushing people away? Why am I always, at arm's length with people? Why can't I form healthy relationships? Why am I always anxious? Why am I always afraid? And you sit down with the therapist and go, okay, well, what happened with your parents when you were young? How did they treat you? How did they do whatever? And you're sort of analyzing the stuff from the past. Now, is it true that your current pain finds its root
In childhood. It still
in
just go back to
childhood
your
and how your
childhood.
parents treated you? Absolutely. But the real healing doesn't come from analyzing what happened in the past. Like usually, so sometimes I'll have my initial call with people on the phone, people who are looking to be clients or who are interested. And basically within half an hour, we can get through everything that you need to know about your past. Usually the general, like if I'm going to boil everything down into, let's say one scenario, there's like one rule, not one rule, but one overarching experience that basically everyone has had, that this all comes down to, is that somewhere in the past, you were made to feel rejected, pushed away, uncomfortable, ashamed, awkward, unsafe for being and expressing your emotions. That's what's underneath the core of everyone. So you're out in public, let's say, and you're crying, and your parents are like, big kids don't cry, you better hold it in. Or maybe you, or people, that's just on the easy end. But then on the abusive side of things, people who would get insulted or get rejected or get sent to their room because like you would ask your parent, like, I'm in pain right now, or I'm hurting, and like, how dare you shut up, go to your room, or just, not a great example, but like throughout our lives, one way or another, we would express ourselves. We would ask for the help that we need. We would cry. We would be in pain. And our parents or our teachers or the authority figures would make us feel bad for being and expressing ourselves. For me in particular, like I had one story where I fell off my bike and my brother went and I was scared. I was only a couple blocks away from home, but I fell off my bike and my brother went and got my dad. My dad showed up. He put me in the back of the car, and I remember him being in the front of the car with my mom being so frustrated. Like, why did I have to come pick him up? He's just a couple of blocks away from home. It's just a skin knee. Why on earth do I have to go here on my day off? Like, it's Sunday and I've been working and I don't want to do this. And I remember him in the front seat being all like disgusted and ashamed with me and frustrated and angry with me. Now, compared to the trauma that a lot of the people that I help with have been through, it's not a big deal. But in that moment, what lesson does a kid learn? A kid learns that if I'm vulnerable, if I open up about the fact that I'm in pain, if I ask for help, if I express myself to my family, it leads to guilt. It leads to shame. It leads to me feeling terrible inside. So here's a moment of pain, of both physical, but of emotional pain, where firstly, let's pause for a second. Behind every emotion, there is a certain amount of energy. And I don't mean this in the spiritual woo-woo kind of sense, but it takes a certain amount of energy for your body to do anything. It takes a certain amount of energy to walk, a certain amount of energy to run, to cry, to scream, to shake. So in that moment, when you're feeling any kind of emotional pain, there's a certain amount of energy going towards that. Your body wants to cry, right? There are times in your life where your body wants to cry, and there's a certain amount of physical and emotional energy behind that urge to cry. Your body desperately wants to cry so that it can purge that energy. The same way that your body naturally wants to sweat when you're working out. It's trying to purge some chemicals and it's trying to keep you operating at the right temperature. That's why your body sweats. For similar reasons, your body wants to cry. It wants to shake. It wants to scream. It wants to laugh. These are all ways of purging emotional energy that is happening in that moment. But as we grow up and we're made to feel unsafe for feeling and purging and expressing our emotions, well, here I am stuck in the backseat of that car and I want to cry. But I know, firstly, I'm already being judged in that moment. And I know that plenty of times when I have cried, my dad has looked down on me and has made me feel really bad about myself. And I remember this expression on his face, like, ugh, because we would go, lots of times we'd go and play racquetball together, for example. And I was never allowed to just play. I just wanted to spend time with my dad, my brother, and have fun. But it was always about getting better, and you had to do it right, and you had to like, and I would leave every one of those situations crying because I just wanted to love and have fun and spend time with my dad. But he just, he was a lot more stressed at the time. He's a stubborn Israeli who kind of lost himself in the army and then came and had to work,
That's
I,
why
I
even
don't
racquetball felt like being in the army. Yeah.
exactly. So I don't blame him, and our relationship is better these days. It's okay. But these are all just examples of how I learned growing up that, wait a minute, if I cry, it's going to lead to more pain for me. He's going to judge me. He's going to look down on me. He's going to be ashamed of me. I'm going to be ashamed of myself. I'm going to feel bad about myself. So there's this energy behind your reactions when you're not getting treated properly. Your body naturally wants to do certain things in order to purge that energy. Cry, scream, shake, laugh, sweat, whatever. But I had learned that if I do those things, it leads to more pain. So here's this energy that my body wants to purge. It wants me to cry, but I don't want to cry because if I cry, it's going to lead to more pain. So I'm holding it in. So what happens to that energy? It doesn't go anywhere. It gets stuck there. Now, the other example that I like to use is as far as like why we can't analyze away the logic and the pain. Here's the second part of it is that let's say you cut your arm 20 years ago and you never did anything about it. So it's been getting infected and it's gangrenous and it's all kind of nasty now. If you show up to the doctor now, he can't heal the wound that happened 20 years ago. He can heal the wound as it is now. I mean, hopefully, but you get my point. We can only work on the way that the wound is now. If you show up to the doctor and show this cut and like, oh my God, my arm is all kinds of infected right now, he might ask you how this happened, like what happened 20 years ago, but it doesn't change anything. We have to work on the wound.
It doesn't fix the 20-year cause of the wound.
He can't go back 20 years and heal. He can't put the Bactine on the initial wound so that it never happened now. We have to work on the way that it is now. So we go into therapy and we start talking about the thing that happened 20 years ago. And while an intellectual understanding of it is nice, because now you start understanding that, oh, I'm not to blame for this pain. And you start recognizing that I'm not alone, that everyone experiences this and I'm not a terrible person. That's nice. But the real problem is the unresolved emotional energy. So throughout our lives, your body, firstly, not only did it hold back from purging this emotional energy, but it started building defense mechanisms around these emotions. It doesn't want you to feel safe.
Them. Yeah.
Exactly. I learned that crying leads to danger, that being vulnerable, that expressing myself, being open. Oftentimes we open up to someone in a relationship and they end up taking advantage of us.
Using that against us. Yeah.
Using it against us. So what do we learn? Oh, well, if I'm vulnerable, it leads to pain. So we build up all of these defense mechanisms around feeling our emotions, around being ourselves, around expressing ourselves. And so basically all of those emotions begin to feel like threats. So when you are in a particular moment and someone is mistreating you and it's bringing up this feeling of shame inside, that feeling inside of you, that's just your body's way of trying to deal with something, trying to purge something. But we learned somewhere along the way that, oh no, that feeling, that's a threat. That's going to lead to danger. That's going to lead to problems. So I need to stuff that away. I need to make sure that I don't feel that. And I need to pretend like I'm not feeling it to the outside world. But in that moment, your body is trying to help you heal. Basically, in the initial moment of trauma, as we started learning this lesson that expressing myself is going to lead to danger, in moments of trauma, it's like this head says to the heart, okay, hold on to this pain, and we'll come back around and deal with it later when we're safe. And the heart that needs to feel and process and express this emotional energy kind of goes, okay, I'll hold on to it. I know that we can't purge it right now. I'll remind you about it tomorrow and the day after. I'll remind you about it when we're safe. So now when we're going through our lives and we're getting triggered by people who are mistreating us or by stress or by anxiety, by whatever, when we're getting triggered by the external world, then the body responds and goes, oh, it's going to send up this pain from the past. It's going to say, hey, here's this pain that you promised me you were going to deal with me when you were safe. Are you safe? Are you ready to deal with me? So when you're getting triggered and this emotion is coming up, that's just something from the past saying, hey, you promised me that you were going to deal with me. Are you safe now? The problem is that we haven't yet realized that we're safe. We are still trying to protect ourselves from these emotions that we're carrying inside of us. But you cannot run from something that lives inside of you.
Mm-mm.
Imagine that you were literally afraid of your shadow, like your actual physical shadow on the ground. If you
And
had a
it's
paranoid
constantly
fear,
there.
it's constantly there, and there is nothing that you
Mm.
can do to escape it. There's only one thing that you can possibly do to escape your shadow: sit in the dark all day long. If you're in the dark, then you have no
Exactly.
shadow.
Mm-mm.
And that's exactly what we've been doing with our emotions, because we've been afraid of these emotions that live inside of us. And you cannot run from it. So you're in paranoid fear every moment of every day with all of the emotions that are running inside of you. And so you basically have only one choice, which is to sit in darkness. So that's why we numb ourselves. We numb away the pain. We do everything that we can to push away the emotions because they feel like threats. But those
Mm.
emotions, they're not threats. That's your body's way of saying, like, hey, here's this pain that you didn't deal with. Can we please deal with it?
Can we
So
purge it
this,
now? Mm.
exactly.
Is that what you call, where you say anxiety is mind versus heart internal conflict? Because it sounds like you said the mind said, okay, park this thing for now, we'll deal with it later. And the heart saying, I need to purge it now. And that's how you describe anxiety.
That's very, very accurate. So you got very, like, because there are a few things that I say about anxiety, and one of them
Mm.
is that anxiety is about this inner conflict that's going on inside, where one part of you wants to go left and one part of you wants to go right, and one part of you wants to just sit down and cry. And because it feels like you're being pulled apart by horses in different directions, there's that inner turmoil going on that creates that anxiety. That's one of
Mm-hmm.
the ways that I explain it. And in that context, yes, you're exactly right, because your heart is the one that desperately wants you to just feel me already. Please feel this pain. Please look at me. You promised me you were going to deal with me when you were safe. Here I am. Please look at me. 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 The heart desperately wants you to feel these things. But the head has learned this lesson along the way that, oh no, if I feel those
The
things, if I
survival
process those things,
instinct kicks in.
exactly, it's going to, so the head thinks, no, 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 I don't want to feel that thing because that thing is going to be a threat. So your heart is yelling at you, please look at me, please look at me, please look at me, please look at me, please look at me. And the head is going, don't you dare look in that direction. Don't you dare look over there. So we learn to stuff away our emotions, and we learn to live from this logical part of ourselves. And that is why so many of us are disconnected from who we really are at our core. We've lost ourselves along the way. We don't realize that we're not living as an authentic version of ourselves because along our lives, we had to stuff away that core version of ourselves and operate based on all of these defense mechanisms. So we have built up our entire identities around the defense mechanisms that we have used to keep ourselves safe, and we don't realize it. We are not that authentic version of ourselves that we were when we were 4 years old, because every time an authentic emotion came up, oh no, that's a threat. So let's push that away. And it could be something even as simple, like something simple like when you were 6 years old, maybe you told your friends, like, oh, I really like this TV show. And then one of your friends went, ew, that TV show's stupid, and you're stupid for liking
Stupid.
it. It's a tiny little thing, but you just realize, wait a minute. When I shared my love and my passion with this person that I care about, it led to pain. So now I'm going to start stuffing that away. And now not only am I going to pretend like I don't like that show, but I'm going to be very weary of admitting the things that I love. I'm gonna create this pattern and this identity of, wait a minute, before I admit that I like something, I
Wait
need to
to
make
hear
sure that
what
other
the
people
others are saying about it. And that's why
exactly.
you have grown-ups even in workspaces who don't volunteer the idea first. They want to
Yeah,
see what everyone in the boardroom is thinking, and so that they can go along with that, so that they don't want to sound like
exactly.
the weird, stupid one.
Yeah. And the thing is, we've developed that pattern so innately and so subconsciously that we don't even realize in our adult lives that the things that you love and the ways that you talk and the ways that you act, they've all been built up around these defense mechanisms that you use to keep yourself safe. So you don't even know what it is that you truly love anymore and what you truly like. because this part of you is taken over. And your
Hmm.
heart, and so this is where the real conflict comes, because another thing that I point out is that, look, your brain can be programmed. You can train your brain to like things that you don't initially like, or you can reprogram your perception of certain experiences, certain things in your life. You can change the way that you think about something.
Yeah.
But you cannot change what your heart knows and wants. Your heart knows what it knows and wants what it wants, and that's all there is to it. So, in order to follow the mind as opposed to the heart, we need to stuff this part away. We need to pretend like that's not there. So we've spent our lifetime following the logical mind while the heart has been there in the background yelling at you like, you promised that you were going to look at me when you were safe. Can
Hmm.
you please look at me? Can you please look at me? Can you please look at me? And every day that you're going through your life and you're getting triggered, you're getting frustrated, and you're getting angry, and you're getting defensive, and you're getting depressed or anxious, that's that core part of you in the background yelling, please look at me. And the head goes, nope, because when I did that, that led to pain. So we keep on going down that pathway, and we never realize that that's not who we are. That's the programmed version of ourselves that we use to keep ourselves safe. One example that I like to use for that is sarcasm. Because I see this a lot on like dating sites, for example, people who pride themselves immensely on their dark humor or on their sarcasm. No judgment, no issues there. But what they don't realize, like, so just firstly, just pointing out, like they'll have like a big line in their dating profile. If you can't handle my sarcasm, then you are not a good fit for me. And they pride themselves so immensely on like my sarcastic sense of humor is, oh my God, I'm such a, and that's okay. But what they don't realize is that sarcasm is a defense mechanism. It's
Ah,
a way that we keep people at arm's length. It's a way that you can say something that is true while pretending that it's not true,
underneath the
just in case,
sarcasm.
just in case they're going to judge you for it. So, or saying something that is not true and pretending it's true, just in case. It's a way of circumventing that vulnerability, because you're going to say
I
what's
don't
really
want to
on your
show my
mind.
true self because they might say it's stupid, like we said earlier.
Yeah,
So you
exactly.
play both sides to see which one is safe and which one you will not be judged for.
Exactly. You're keeping people at arm's length in that way. Or like think about it as like I like to think sometimes about sitcoms where a character is like they're going to make a it's not even just sitcoms, real life happens all the time also, but where someone's going to make a joke hitting on someone. Like I'm
Mm.
flirting with you and I'm going to make this joke about it, and if they respond positively, then it wasn't a joke. But if they respond negatively, oh no, no,
I'm
no, I
just
was just
kidding.
kidding. I was just kidding. Exactly. So that's what sarcasm is. It's a way of keeping people at arm's length. It's a way of pretending that something isn't true while it is true, or pretending that something is true while it isn't true, and saying it in that way so that you can then kind of figure out which way you want to go about it. It's a way
Play it
of
safe.
hiding your authenticity under this sarcastic tone. So
So
there's
Benji, how
nothing.
do we build? Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying that people don't realize that they're doing it, and the whole reason that I brought this up is because there are lots of ways that we have built our identities around those defense mechanisms. So people who are
Mm.
sarcastic, people with a dark sense of humor, people who do keep people at arm's length, people who have trouble forming connections, people who don't know who they truly are deep down in their core, people who have taken jobs and who've sat in careers for 20 years at something that didn't feel right because they don't know who they are anymore.
Hmm. So how do we craft this now authentic self-identity that and also we will bring out all that's been hiding in the heart and then start going towards that light?
Yeah. So here's the thing, and this healing can actually be so much simpler than people think it is. It's not necessarily easy. First, it's not necessarily easy to navigate, and it's not going to be comfortable at every second, but it is actually simple. And the simple truth underlying all of this is that your body is trying to help you heal all the time. As we were just saying, when you're going through your day and someone's being rude to you or someone's being whatever, and it's triggering these emotions, those emotions that are coming up, that's your unresolved trauma yelling at you saying, here I am, please look at me. And all that we really have to start doing is start understanding that those internal messages that we're getting, that turning feeling in the pit of your stomach, the tightness in your chest, the negative self-talk, the emotions of fear and doubt and shame and guilt, all of those things, they're just your body's way of trying to purge emotional energy that you haven't dealt with before. But the thing is, when these come up, that's your head saying to you, okay, you promised me that you were going to look at me when you were safe. Are you safe? Are you ready to look at me? And your head goes, no, I'm not safe. So hold on to that pain again, and here, now take this new moment of pain and add it to the pile. So we just have to start recognizing, wait a minute, that internal discomfort that I'm feeling, that's not a threat. It's my body's way of starting to heal. It's trying to purge this emotional energy. And if I just let go of the resistance around it, if I can not be afraid of it in that moment and start leaning into it, then you can start purging the emotional energy. And there are basically two things that I would, if I'm going to break this healing down into the simplest way that I can explain it, it's two things that we need to understand. Number one is there are three elements of your experience of reality. There are three things that you experience every moment of every day, and these are the only things that you can experience at any given moment. Most people have never thought about this, because even as I'm saying this right now, I don't know
I'm
if you
waiting.
like,
I'm like,
yeah,
this is gonna be good.
Well, like what are you experiencing in this moment? There are three things: thoughts, emotions, and sensations. That's
Okay.
it. There's nothing else that so you're watching me through the screen, the light that's hitting your eye, the sound that's hitting your ears, every bit of your experience of the external world, those are sensations. It's just the light, it's just your brain interpreting wavelengths and all that. It's just sensations. Then your understanding of what's happening and your experience of your conscious inner world, that's your thoughts. So the sounds are hitting your ears, but those are just sounds. It's only because we both have language and we both understand English that you can then take those sounds and translate them into meaningful whatever.
Okay.
So that's your conscious inner world, is your thoughts. And then there's your emotions, which is this kind of intangible thing. It's hard to put your finger on exactly what is happiness, exactly what is sadness, what is joy, what is fear. You can't really put it into words very well, but it's also not a physical thing. It's not a sensation. There are sensations associated with it, like anxiety comes with a turning feeling in the pit of your stomach, but fear is not in and of itself a sensation. Happiness is not a sensation that you feel in your body. It's kind of like the flavor of reality that you're experiencing at a moment. It's your mood. It's your overall just kind of, it's sort of the lens through which you're interpreting things in the moment. Because when you happen to be happy, you experience things a certain way and you interpret things a certain way. And when you happen to be sad or angry, you experience things a different way. So thoughts, emotions, sensations, that's the core. That's all that you can experience. And every moment of every day, you're experiencing those three things. Now, the secret is that there's this subconscious cycle going on between those three elements of your experience every moment of every day. So a lot of people in the healing space talk about how, your thoughts manipulate your emotions, right? Like, oh, if you want to be happy, you need to think positive thoughts kind of thing. So
Affirmations every day, repeat, and then the emotions will come along for the ride.
exactly, which is nice. There is some truth to that your thoughts impact your emotions, but it's much more true that your emotions manipulate your thoughts. When you happen to be feeling sad, you think much more pessimistically. You see the terrible that's in the world in a very different way. When you happen to be happy, you're much more willing to see the positive things.
In
You think very
everything, you
differently.
smell the flowers, everything looks good, life is great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, point being, there is a subconscious cycle happening between these three elements of your experience of reality, and it goes both ways. So, basically, kind of what happens is a moment of fear. Well, we resist that emotion. We don't want to fully feel it, and we want to make sense of it because we need to work on, we don't want to feel the emotion of fear. We want to tackle the thing that we think is causing the fear because we've spent a lifetime pushing aside our emotions. So a moment of fear leads us into our thoughts. We start thinking, we start analyzing, we start looking at the things that are causing this. Now, those thoughts create a stress response in our body because we're telling ourselves all of the reasons why we're not safe. So those thoughts create that turning feeling or the tension in your stomach, or they have you tensing up your shoulders or clenching your jaw or whatever, because you don't feel safe in that moment. And so that stress response in your body then tells your subconscious mind that you're in danger, which creates more fear. And that
Mm.
fear creates more thoughts. And those thoughts create more of that stress response. And that stress response creates more emotions. And those emotions create more thoughts. And those thoughts create more sensations. Around and around and around and around and around we go. And it works in the other direction as well. So each one of these elements is constantly manipulating the other, mainly because we've spent our whole lives living up here.
Yep.
We are only truly connected and only truly in charge of, because we're not, but in charge of what's happening up here. We've spent a lifetime avoiding the emotions and avoiding the sensations. So we're only having any sense of awareness of what's going on up here. And because of that, the cycle keeps on fueling itself around and around and around and around we go. So as I was saying, there are two main things that I need you that everyone needs to understand about this healing journey. Number one is these three elements of your experience and how they're constantly manipulating each other. So in order to start healing, you're going to need to learn how to isolate those three experiences, how to understand your thoughts. They're their own thing. And when you're stuck and you're cycling negative thoughts and all of that, they're not real. All of the negative cycling bullshit that you're telling yourself, it's actually just your mind's way of making sense of emotions that it doesn't know how to feel. So we learn how to deal with our thoughts as their own thing. And then we learn how to feel our emotions as their own thing. Like a moment of feeling down or sadness doesn't mean that there's a problem. But sometimes, you happen to be feeling down one day and your mind desperately wants to understand, why am I feeling down today? And when your mind looks for an answer of why am I feeling down today, well, guess what? It's going to find an answer. There's always going to be an answer. There's never
There's
no answer.
evidence of everything you have already decided. You find the evidence.
Exactly. There's
Yeah.
never going to be a moment in your life where everything is so perfect that you cannot possibly find a reason behind a low emotion. So you feel low emotion, your brain finds a reason, and now there's a reason. There wasn't a moment ago, it was just an emotion, but your brain wanted logic attached to it. So we learn how to feel our emotions as their own thing, and we learn how to feel the sensations in their own thing. So for example, for people who are dealing with anxiety, I remember there was this moment at which I had managed to deal with my thoughts. The thoughts weren't fooling me anymore. And the emotions, I was still feeling fear, but I knew the fear was going to pass. Everything is fine.
Mhm.
So, but there was still that turning feeling in the pit of my stomach. And there was this one moment where I finally, okay, I know the thoughts are nonsense. I know that the emotion will pass, so I'm not scared of these things. And then I turned my attention directly to that turning feeling in the pit of my stomach. And what I realized in that moment was, hey, guess what? That's all it is. It's a turning feeling in your stomach. It's not comfortable. It's not pleasant, but I don't need to freak out about it. I don't need to add fear to this experience of what does that turning feeling in the pit of my stomach mean? It doesn't mean anything. Well, actually, it means my body is healing. It's trying to purge unresolved emotional energy. I don't need to add thoughts to it. So when we can separate those three elements of your experience and deal with each one as their own thing, then the cycle stops itself. You stop being afraid of your emotions. You stop being afraid of that turning feeling in the pit of your stomach. You stop believing the nonsense negative thoughts that are going on, and your body can finally start purging all of the unresolved emotion that it's been going through, and you can sort of start settling yourself back to the authentic version of yourself that you have stuffed away throughout the years. That's number
So
one.
when you
This,
do feel whether pit of the stomach or a lot of the time it's something in your chest, like it feels like it wants to come out, like your heart is literally going to be ripped apart when you are triggered, you can just say, hey, that's what that is. Or do we need to look deeper and say, why am I triggered? Let me look back to my childhood. What's going on here? And that's when we go back to what you said earlier, which is analyze the trauma. So based on what you just said, it feels like just be in that moment, feel it, and let it go.
so while that is a bit oversimplified, and because I really hate it when there are spiritual or emotional teachers who tell their clients like, oh, just sit with the emotion. Firstly, what does that mean to just sit with it?
I've
Because
heard
no, it
things
is true. It is true. No, but it is
Yeah.
true. The ultimate answer is you need to sit with the emotion. You need to let it go. But what the hell do those phrases mean? That's my frustration with. So it's oversimplified, not your fault, but so, and it's impossible for me to give a short answer to exactly what those phrases mean because we have to learn how to experience these things. But so what you pointed out was it's who cares about what happened in the past? Yes, this stuff stems from the past, but analyzing it isn't where this healing is going to come from. And as far as when this thing happens in the moment, firstly, it's not just tied to one thing. It's
Mm,
never just tied to, oh, well, there was this one moment where my dad did this to me, and that's why I'm feeling that way in this moment. It's attached to 1,000 memories where you felt a particular thing. So, yes, it started in the past, but it's never just one memory.
mm,
And the logic isn't going to help us. The other thing that I like to say about analyzing the past is you can't read the label from inside the bottle. What I mean by that is you will never fully understand your defense mechanisms and where they really came from until you escape them. So when you are constantly stuffing away your emotion, when you're constantly being sarcastic with people, for example, let's go with that example because that's what we were
yeah.
talking about. When you're constantly being sarcastic with people as a way of keeping them at arm's length, you're using that sarcasm as a defense mechanism against some of your emotions. And as long as you are still stuck in a state of fear such that you need to use sarcasm, you're never going to fully understand why you're doing it. It's only once you process the emotions and once you break free of that pattern that then you'll be able to look back and go, oh, that's why I was doing it. Because you need to
Mm,
change the emotional reaction to it first before any of that can really make sense. Which is the exact same reason why I can sit down with you. Let's say there is someone who's using sarcasm as a way of keeping people at arm's length and who can't have healthy relationships because of it. If
yeah.
I were to sit down with them and explain to them, oh, here are all of the reasons why you're being sarcastic, they wouldn't fully understand it. They could understand it from up here. They wouldn't understand it here.
It wouldn't stick
It wouldn't
in the
penetrate.
heart space. Yeah.
They would only, like, I can tell you the logic of it, but they won't understand, actually, I'm doing it to avoid pain. They can
Hmm.
understand the words, oh, I'm doing it to avoid pain. But until they allow themselves to feel that pain that they are avoiding, it's not going to fully make sense to them. But if you show them how to feel that discomfort first and how to process it, then they can look back and go, oh, I was being sarcastic because I was trying to avoid that experience that I just went through. It's not until they finally experience that purging that they're actually going to understand what this really is all about.
Mm-hmm. So does it mean the work you do with your clients mostly is going into the heart space, the purging of the emotions? Because a lot of the stuff we hear is more the logical side.
Yeah, it's not. We're not dealing with the logical side of things.
Mm,
Basically, I like to call what I do. So think of if therapy is a process of drilling down into the past and finding the pain that caused this,
mm,
what I do is a process of excavation. So drilling is like, okay, here's where I'm living my life, and here's this past trauma, and I'm gonna drill down, try and find that trauma. And when I find that trauma, I'm gonna pull it up to the top, and by doing so, everything else is gonna crumble and it's gonna settle into who I'm supposed to be. Doesn't work that way, which also plays into I said that there were two things that I wanted everyone to understand about this healing.
right.
Um, I mentioned number one, which is those three elements. Number two, I'm going to say it here because it actually fits into the question that you're asking. The second thing that we need to understand about this healing journey is that it needs to be done gradually. You need to
Mm,
build these emotional muscles. And this is why I call what I do emotional fitness training. Because So think about that experience from your childhood, the worst of the worst thing that happened to you that really set all of this in motion in the first place, when your parents were abusive, or your grandmother didn't treat you right, or you experienced, death at a young age, whatever. That thing that happened to you when you were very young, that's like the 500-pound weight of emotional distress that you're carrying with you.
mm,
And right now, you're not even strong enough to lift 5 pounds. Because you haven't been practicing. You've been spending a lifetime not feeling your emotions. Imagine that you spent the last 20 years not walking on your legs. Well, your legs are weak, and you certainly cannot walk into the gym and lift 500 pounds right now because you've spent a lifetime actively not using your legs. Similarly, we have spent a lifetime actively not connecting with our emotions. So we haven't built that emotional strength, that real emotional muscle. So we need to start small. You're going to start with the small triggers. You don't want to deal with when your parents smacked you upside the head and put you in an ice bath when you were 5 years old as a way to punish you. That's way too intense. You want to deal with, okay, well, what about when I'm stuck in line at the grocery store and this person in front of me is taking a really long time to pay? Okay, well, that's going to bring up some frustration. Let's learn how to deal with that. Because in that moment, there's a little trigger. So we need to learn how to deal with that 5-pound weight, and then that 10-pound weight, and then the 15 and the 20. Because what good is it to hunt for the worst of the worst trauma that you ever experienced if you haven't yet built the skills and the tools and the wisdom of how to deal with that? It's like a dog chasing a car. Even if the dog catches the car, what is it going to do with it when it gets it? So, what are you going to do with the worst trauma that you ever experienced if I were to bring it up to you right now before you've learned how to handle it? So,
Because here's the
this,
thing, sorry, Benji.
yeah,
All this, what you just brought up is what we deal with every day. The people losing it at Target or at the bus. You know what I mean? These everyday, everybody's just triggered.
everyone is doing, they're playing what I like to call the anger game. And this isn't just about anger, it's also about frustration, jealousy, shame, envy, whatever. But anger game is just a catchy title for it and helps me explain it a little bit.
Mm.
Here's what the anger game is. We're all carrying trauma and unresolved pain inside of us that we're afraid to feel. So when someone comes and does anything that, like, maybe I express, like, let's go back to the old TV show example. Let's say even as an adult, I expressed that, oh yeah, you know what, I just saw this movie last night and I thought it was really good. And then someone across from me goes, oh, you know what, I saw that movie yesterday and it was the
It
stupidest thing that I had
sucked.
ever seen. So now all of a sudden I'm feeling threatened because I had just invested some part of my personality in this statement of, oh, I really like that movie. And now here's this person who's saying that they disagree with it, which makes me feel uncomfortable and unstable because my identity is being challenged in that moment. I just invested a certain part of myself in that statement, and now that statement is being challenged by this other person, which makes me feel unsafe in my body. So it triggers some unresolved emotions inside of me. And because of those unresolved emotions, maybe I get a little defensive. Maybe I get a little aggressive with this person. Maybe I'm trying to avoid feeling that discomfort inside of me. I feel threatened in that moment, and I don't know how to process that emotion. So I'm going to maybe get a little defensive. And when I get a little defensive, well, the thing that I say challenges that person's identity and their beliefs because they said it was so stupid now. And I'm going to say, well, how can you possibly say that that was stupid? It was brilliantly written. So me now saying that maybe makes that person feel unsafe and feel like, maybe, oh, wait a minute, am I being stupid? Because I just thought that this movie was stupid, but he's saying that it's so, like, maybe I don't understand something. So they're feeling threatened. So they respond in a particular way. They just got triggered. So they're going to respond defensively. And then their defensive reaction makes me respond defensively, and they respond defensively. And so I'm getting angry, and then they're getting angry or defensive or upset or ashamed. Or we're both triggering each other back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until one of us blows up, or until we both, we walk away from that conversation. Now I'm carrying more uncertainty and more shame inside of myself, and so is that other person. And then you go home and you have a conversation with someone who triggers some other part of you, and some of them are very innocuous. So sometimes if it's just about not liking a movie, sure, brings up some discomfort inside of me and we get a little frustrated with each other, but it doesn't end up in this giant blowout. But then
Mm.
you go home to your wife or to your spouse, and you didn't take out the garbage. And they're going to say, well, why? And they're feeling already frustrated because you didn't take out the garbage. So they're going to say, so why didn't you take out the garbage? And now you're feeling really threatened because now not only is your personality being threatened, but your security and your safety and your relationship and this love is being threatened. So why didn't you take out the garbage? And I don't know how to deal with that threatening feeling inside of myself. So I'm going to respond back, well, because you didn't really tell me how to do it. Now I'm getting angry. Now she's getting angry. And then I'm getting angry and she's getting angry. And it just blows up and blows up and blows up. All because neither of us have learned how to feel into that discomfort. That when she told me, why didn't you take out the garbage? I felt threatened, and that was the only real problem. But I haven't learned how to process that emotion. So I responded a certain way, so she responded a certain way, so I responded a certain way. And we both blew up at each other, all because neither of us have ever learned how to feel that emotional discomfort. So what we are trying to do through this process is start small, build our way up, and start learning how to feel safe while feeling the emotional discomfort. because your body is just trying to help you. It's trying to help you purge. So what we're doing then, firstly, we're building the emotional muscle, and then we're doing, as I was referring to earlier, excavating, where we're going to deal with the emotions that come to the top. So in that moment that I'm being challenged and like, oh, why didn't you take out the garbage? Yes, the reason that I feel threatened is because 30 years ago, my mom punished me for not taking out the garbage kind of thing. But who cares about that? All that I care about is right here in this moment. There's an uncomfortable emotion that's being triggered inside of me. And all that I need to do is learn how to feel it and feel safe feeling it and learn how to process it and purge it and express it. When I say express it, I don't necessarily mean in the therapist kind of way. If you need to sit down with your partner and say, I'm feeling very unsafe right now because you are talking to, like, yes, we want to learn how to express
Of
ourselves to
course.
people, but I'm not saying it's not in that necessarily touchy-feely kind of way. We need to
Mm-hmm.
learn how to express our emotions, how to allow our body to, like, if our body wants to shake, if our body wants to scream, if our body wants to cry, if our body wants to, there are all sorts of ways that we can express the emotions themselves without translating them into words. And the more comfortable that you get feeling your discomfort, the more like, okay, I'm going to get home. She's going to say, why didn't you take out the garbage? And because she might be getting upset in that moment. But when she gets upset, wait a minute, now I don't feel threatened. So when she goes to me, why didn't you take out the garbage? I go, you know what? Yeah, you're right. I didn't. I'm sorry. And like, you're upset. Like, I can handle the situation very differently.
Instead of putting, oil to the
Yeah,
fire.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a tiny example, but I think that it will make my point. I went camping recently and I borrowed a tent from my brother. And he mentioned to me that the last time that I had returned the tent, that it was still dirty. Now, in the past, in a lot of ways, that might make me feel threatened because I don't want my brother to be upset with me. And I don't want him to think that I'm irresponsible. And I don't want him to not lend me his tent again. So when he brings up this authentic just issue of like, you know what, the last time you did it, it was still dirty and I didn't appreciate that kind of thing, I might get defensive about it. Be like, what? But you don't you don't clean it every single time that you use it, or like, what did you expect me to do? It was as clean as I could possibly do. There are all sorts of ways that I could have gotten defensive about it. But instead, my reaction was, oh, I'm sorry about that. Thank you for telling me because I don't want to cause any problems between us. And I will absolutely do my best when I borrow it this time to make sure that it came back. So because I didn't feel threatened in the same way, I was able to respond differently. Or like you said, I'm not fueling the fire. Because if I did, he would have said to me, Benji, you didn't clean the tent well, and I didn't appreciate that. And I would have said, well, what do you expect me to do? It can't be perfectly clean. You're camping in the woods. And he would go, well, look, it's my property. If you want to, and then it would have led to a fight between us. All because I hadn't learned to feel the discomfort of being challenged. But when we can
Which,
learn how to feel the discomfort inside of us, you can handle everything in a completely different manner. And then you're also going to be able to tell the difference between situations and relationships that are right for you and situations and relationships that are not right for you. You'll be able to
yeah.
easily tell the difference between a toxic relationship and a healthy one. And you're going to have the strength and the confidence and the certainty to walk away from toxic relationships without needing to be like, you're treating me bad and I don't want to be here anymore. I'll just be like, okay, here's this person. They're not emotionally mature enough to treat me the way that I need to be treated. No problem. Thank you so much. Have a good day. And I don't need to harbor the anger or the resentment around it.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
all of this healing, sorry, I know I give
go
long answers, but
ahead.
all of
You're
this
the guest.
healing is just about learning how to finally feel fully safe, feeling all of those emotions that are trying to run through you.
Feel fully safe, a feeling that a lot of us are still searching for, especially when it comes to our emotions. Benji, I've taken up so much of your time. I don't even want to look at the clock, but do you have last words of wisdom for about 60 seconds? And if there's anything you were hoping to share with us that I didn't ask you.
Hmm. As far as final words of wisdom goes, I think what I would say is this inner healing work, learning how to finally face your emotions, not the trauma behind them, not the logic behind them, but to learn how to finally feel safe experiencing everything that's happening in your body is the most important work that you will ever do in your life. Everything else that you want to achieve relies on this work. If you want to have a healthy, loving relationship, if you want to have a truly successful career that feels right to you, where you're not betraying yourself and stuffing yourself away, if you want to explore the world, explore your passions, explore your hobbies, have happy friendships, it all comes down to this inner thing first. And we spend so much of our lifetimes trying to solve our external problems, telling ourselves, okay, well, maybe one day when I have all of the money in the bank and when I have everything fine, maybe then I'll turn inside and look at what's going on here. But it's the other way around. If you turn to solve this inner stuff first, then you can bring a completely different version of yourself out into the world and everything else will change. This is the most important work that you will ever do. So, and you're not saving yourself anything by avoiding it, because as we were saying with this whole excavating thing, the uncomfortable emotions that you're avoiding, they're happening anyway. And the
They
more that
don't
you
go
avoid them,
away.
the more that you avoid them, the more that they will stick around. So you're not saving yourself anything by avoiding the emotional discomfort. You're actually perpetuating it. So find a path, find whatever works for you. Reach out to me if you want, but my final words of wisdom is just the sooner that more of us do this inner healing work, the sooner that we can make the real changes in this world that we desperately need to make.
Words of wisdom from Benjy Sherer, the mental health coach and emotional fitness trainer. You can call him Benjamin when he turns 80. But before you go, Benjamin, Benjy, I found you on your Facebook page that you share so much wisdom when it comes to all of this work. Please give us not just your Facebook page, but everything else on the web where we can find you.
Okay. So also, by the way, I've been posting a lot more like short videos. I've been doing the whole TikTok and YouTube shorts things. So you can find me on Facebook. I think it's just called, like, whatever your platform of choice is, just search up Benjy Sherer Coaching. And Benjy is spelled with a Y, Benjy. I'm sure everyone will see it here. But so I'm on TikTok, I'm on YouTube, I'm on Facebook. I also have a public Facebook group. Like, I've got my business page on Facebook. It's Benjy Sherer. You can find it, whatever. I also have a group on Facebook called Self-Love and Shadow Work, Modern Awakenings. So you can find me there. I make a bunch of posts there. I answer questions there. And for anyone who wants to really learn more about me and my approach, there, I do have a couple of books. I would recommend you start with the first one. It's called Feelings First Shadow Work. It's available on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles. There's also an audiobook of it, so it's available anywhere. Or you can find my webinar, free webinar, which is called Healing Feelings First, where I go over some of the main misconceptions that we have around this inner healing journey and kind of explain my approach to things. And you can find that at my website, benjysherercoaching.com/replay. So you can find that there.
Benjy Sherer, I'm going to put all of your URLs on the show notes, all of the platforms you've mentioned. Thank you so much. I've taken so much of your time. I hope you don't have any appointments lingering.
It's okay. I'm doing fine. Yeah.
Thank you for being here today. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a rating and a review on Apple and Spotify, and stay tuned for more episodes to come.